Okay, so this should hopefully be the final build of the short throw kit. The major driver for this update versus what I started selling a year ago is instead of cutting and welding the shift levers like I was doing before, because it really just kind of took a lot of time. And the consistency, I don't know, this just looks nicer, it works better. That, like, in the long run, it's going to be less labor on my end, which is where most of the cost comes from. But the new kit comes with a billet lever, main lever arm instead of the welded one, and instead of the 3D printed bushings, which this one has, I've now got my new. We've got acetal for the ball retainer sleeve. We've got Delrin AF 500 for the anti-rotation sliders. And again, we have Delrin AF 500 for the slave bearing, the gate selector slave bearing. And we can get a little close up here of what we're looking at. I have some other videos. So this is very strong. It's very stiff. This stuff is a lot more compliant, but it's tougher. It's got PTFE fiber in it. And this stuff is like 4 times the cost of aluminum. So they're actually extremely expensive to make. They're almost as much as brass and bronze would be. And I considered using those materials, but I really didn't want to get into binding issues. And this really just is the optimal material. Sometimes plastic just works better than metal. So I guess we'll start with what you get in the kits. And then I'll go through probably updating my shifter. Because the more videos I make, like I don't want to be using components that I would need to sell to customers. Because it's just lost money. So the different kits you can get. When I first started selling, the first thing I launched was just the short throw lever, and I never intended to sell just the lever by itself, but a lot of people were like, hey, I don't want the full kit, I don't need the full kit, I just want a little shorter throw. And I did give the warning that, hey, it's not going to clear the center console that well, so, you know, whatever. But a lot of people are like, I'm not even running a center console. So I said, hey, some sales is better than none, which I regret now. I will probably take some pictures or take some more video here, but I will definitely either take some new images or splice in some stuff I've taken over the last week. But for reference, this is how your shifter comes with the bucket bolted to the top of the base plate. And there are some issues. When you lift this point from here to here, specifically on the 4th gen Accord, this will now interfere with the center console, depending on the bushing combination you have and depending on what cables you have. And it'll touch. And I knew that going into this, and so I designed the kits I started selling a year ago have this bucket drop kit, which I am now requiring in all just the short throw kits. And the reason for that is it's just bad, I don't know, product. It's bad engineering. And even when you put it on the customer, I think these were selling for $75 by themselves, and now getting the required bucket drop kit I think brings it up to like 110. So it's another 35 bucks. But then you have no clearance issues and everything works perfect. So I would much rather have you be extremely satisfied than be like, yeah, it works good, except, like, I don't like that except. That's why I got into this business, because I got tired of buying products that fell short of my expectations, I guess, along with the customer service. So all the kits that I sent out a week ago that just got this, before I told them it was an issue, and I still have yet to have a single person come to me and be like, hey man, this is an issue, I decided to just build a whole bunch of these bucket drop kits, which is essentially just these aluminum spacers and longer bolts that you actually put the bucket below the shifter and it drops it down. And that does a couple things. Is it relines up the cables so that the cables are straight, so it leads to less binding, but it also clears the center console. It does drop the shift knob about 30 millimeters, so as soon as I get done with this, I will be, I've sold them to people previously, but I have a 30 millimeter shift lever extension that I will also be selling. So if it's kind of annoying now, you can either get your own M10 by 1.5 threaded adapter, or you can just wait for me to put one out, which will most likely go with a shift knob that I'm also making. And so I guess to kind of explain why you get what you get in the base rebuild kit is this hits the center console, and so we want to put it under here and readjust it. Now the problem is even if I make the spacers as short as they can be, to where this barely interferes, the bolt head that goes right here, so this bolt head hits the body, and that bolt head is only 3.5 millimeters tall, and so I had to make sure to clear that. And so my spacers had to be long enough so that this metal doesn't hit this metal, and this is stamped steel, so I need to account for a couple millimeters of tolerance on both ends. So I needed to make sure I was at least 4 millimeters minimum, away from this plate. It's so great. I fixed the issue of the cables and everything hitting, but now that bolt hits. So what I've done is I have these new bushings, and these are for the short throw kit, and what they do is they lift up the entire shifter just enough so that the bucket clears the body. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm reorienting everything so like it fits properly in the center console and clears the body. And after selling some of these kits, what I ended up finding is one of the guys got the spacer kit, but he's like, hey man, my bolts they're not long enough. And I was like, great, I forgot that the CB Accords came with 3 different types of bushings. Okay, I'm back. So, the 3 different types of bushings. There's a picture on the posting that will show you what you have versus what you need. So some of the shifters got these little tiny guys, which of course came with these little tiny bolts. Okay. A lot of the kits came with these equal length rubber spacers, or rubber bushings. And also, I'm not sure why, some of the kits came with Yeah, there we go. So there's a tall one and a short one. And so some of them still have the little one, but they have this big taller guy. And I'm not completely sure why. And I don't have any of the longer bolts in here. But these are essentially the same height. And they use the same center metal piece. And so what I've done in the listing is I don't currently have the new bolts here because they're a flange stainless bolt. But if your kit, if your shifter comes with these little guys, there is another listing that I added that comes with some new longer bolts and washers. Yeah, I think that's just it. It's 4 new bolts, 4 new washers. If you're ordering it with a kit, don't get the option that has shipping and handling. We're still struggling getting the built-in shipping function working, so unfortunately all my listings have to include shipping, which is why I'm doing the packages, because shipping and packaging and logistics all goes into calculating the sale price, and so the more stuff you get together, the less you have to pay for shipping and handling. So that's where some of that savings comes from. So yeah, if you have the short bushings, order the extended bolts from the listing. And so there's a couple things. So here is the OEM replacement bushing. So this is if you're not running the short throw kit and you just want to run the premium rebuild kit. That basically makes it feel like a Porsche. And then you can kind of see the height difference here. I guess I'll zoom in on that. There we go. And there's something else that you got to pay attention to when installing the lifted bushings. So these are the front bushings. They basically look just, these are polyurethane, by the way. So they basically look just like the OEM bushings, but they are a little bit taller. These go in the front, up here, where it's flat. And the reason I had to provide all new bushings instead of just spacers is because, as you can see, these are at an angle, right? So as you go up, with the reference point on the body being in the same spot, the bolts are getting further and further apart. And so these rear bolts, or bushings, are actually eccentric, as you can kind of see. They don't sit centered. And so with the rear bushings, they both have a marking. You want this marking and this marking to line up. And then they need to face each other, so they need to face inward. And you can kind of see that eccentric offset. And so what these allow you to do is run the lifted setup without having any binding or fitment issues. Now, if you don't get new bushings, or you have bushings from another maker, whatever, what you can do, and I don't recommend it with the poly bushings, though it is probably fine, is you could run without this center sleeve. And that will actually give you enough room to bolt the rears down. So if you have your own bushings or you don't want to buy bushings, you can put a 5mm spacer or 5mm worth of washers underneath this, and then just not run this center metal on the rear, and it will work. So this explains the bushings and some of those issues. And I know it seems like a lot, but I just couldn't sell a half engineered product. It's not me. It's not. If it doesn't fit like OEM, I'm not going to make it. Or if I can't make it fit like OEM, I'm not going to make it outside of individual orders. Okay, so that covers the short throw kit. These are actually orders I got to ship out tomorrow. There's actually 2 other things here. So what I'm showing here is the 2 different options. So 90 to 93 Accords came with 2 different main shift levers. And I suspect this one that uses a cotter pin, as you can see right there, it has a cotter pin for retention, just like the gate selector. I suspect that's from older tooling and manufacturing. And the later Accords, for the most part, got an M5, just like the CD Accords, the 5th gens. And so what I think happened is this was an older design that they started production with. And I know that they had already started engineering this design for the 5th gen Accords. So what I think would happen is sales on the 4th gen exploded because they did sell a lot, and they actually had to pull ahead tooling to meet volume from the new supplier. And that actually happens a lot. Like, you'll get OEM vehicles where you have like a 225 50 17 like all season tire, and then that same car also gets another all season of the same size but from a different manufacturer. So it's not any performance gain, it's just that sometimes suppliers can't meet the manufacturing demands with all the customers that the manufacturer gets. So like there will be some splits like that. So like I've seen some 9091s have this, even though most of them have the cotter pin version, and I've seen some 9293s also have the cotter pin version. I suspect this is why nobody's actually made a short throw kit for the Accords, because the complexity in these is crazy. You got 3 different height bushings. There's 3 different kinds of shift cables. Some have adjustable rod ends. Some have 2 rod ends. Some have 1 non-adjustable rod end and 1 non-adjustable bushing, and some have 2 bushings. It's so like there's just a lot of complexity along this platform, and it's really frustrating. So to make one lever adapter fit both shift levers, I had to get a little creative. Otherwise, these kits would have cost a lot more, because I have a huge box of billet shift levers and gate selectors, because I had to buy a lot for the cost to be affordable to you guys. So here's what the main difference is. The way these are mounted is the shift post, first of all, it goes onto the shift post, and there is included sandpaper in the kit. And the reason for that is the shift posts can vary from 8.0 to 8.1 millimeters, and they're everywhere in between. And you need a good fit. The problem is these ones, the cotter pin version, these have a 7.8 to like 7.95 millimeter diameter. And so what I did was I made the diameter fit all of the cotter pin ones. And for the M5 ones, I've got a reamer that reams it out to a slightly larger diameter. So technically they're a little different to get proper fitment, because I don't want this thing wiggling at all. So that's one reason that they're kind of different. The other thing that's different is the offset of this face to the surface of the lever arm is also very different between these two. So if you've got the M5, which is the first one I designed around, the adapter mates right up against the lever arm, and the U-bolt goes around the lever arm and, tightens her down. And so you've got this, which is a really strong connection, and then this for a little extra security, and this keeps it pretty tight. I had considered drilling a hole through this and allowing you to use a set bolt, which, if there are any durability issues in the long run, we will address that, but I suspect it'll be okay. Also, this is the updated U-bolt, so it's got lock nuts, and the whole thing is yellow zinc plated. Unfortunately, for cost reasons, To avoid making a custom U-bolt, these are standard and not metric threads, which means... So this is a 7/16 nut. And then it also comes with this carbon fiber nylon spacer that is form fitted. I can probably grab one of those to demonstrate. There we go. So this is a very tough material. And I realized I've been talking this whole time without my face in the camera. But this is a really tough material. So it's just a spacer that forms to the shift lever. And so that's why I need to specify whether you have the M5 cotter pin set up or you have the 2 cotter pins set up. What's up? Okay. I'll come find you when I'm done. And so those are the differences, and since you can't really bolt this guy down here, while this is enough force, there's a little M4 screw you get back here that you just screw it in and tighten it down. It might not hurt to put Loctite on it. I suspect it won't hurt, and it might be better. This whole assembly is red Loctited down, so you're going to have to, if you wanted to take it apart for whatever reason, you'd have to heat the heck out of it. Yeah, so those are the main differences between the short throw kits. The other kits that you get is you can just get a premium rebuild kit. And the reason I call this premium is because my new inserts are technically preloaded. See how it sits in here? And so when you assemble this into this guy, it gives it a little bit of squeeze. And so that's why I uploaded the video on how to set these. You can go watch that video in detail. I'll link it in the description. But essentially, I get them fitted so that they fit just like this, so that they just sit in there nicely. But what you have to do, unfortunately, because of manufacturing tolerance variation with these guys, is you need to assemble the shifter once you rebuild it without any of the lubricant and feel how it moves. And if it's too stiff and sticky, then you need to take it apart and you need to sand these down to where it gets to where you like it. At some point it should feel really good, like you should feel a little bit of friction, but the transmission detents still work, but the knob should not move at all. As you can see here, if I twist this, nothing happens. And it's the same story on the gate selector bushing, though it is significantly easier to tune in because you just have to make sure it fits. These are complicated to put together, unfortunately, because when you go to tighten the bolts together, the alignment of those plates can move around if you're not careful and actually cause it to bind up. So you may be like, oh man, this is like really sticky, and it's actually not because the tolerancing is off, it's just because the orientation is off. So you'll have to play with it, unfortunately, to get this kind of performance. Very, very little friction, but it's extremely tight. And so the more effort you put into it, the better results you'll get. I tried to get the tolerances as loose as they can so that it takes very little touch-up work to get those in. But the premium rebuild kit comes with those new inserts. It comes with a brand new, so that's kind of the bearing pack that you'll get. And to show you what that looks like on its own is these. So these are ones that I machined by hand from my older kits. These I have a CNC shop do because it saves a lot of time and they just look better. But these are stainless steel high misalignment spacers that go into a spherical PTFE bearing. So this is a really high quality bearing, and you end up with this, which replaces the plastic one that you get from Honda. I mean, I've had a lot of other videos comparing all these parts, but I feel like I should really show the parts they're replacing here. Yeah, let me grab that too. So yeah, this whole pack replaces the factory one if you get the whole thing. And so this is just a really nice setup that's going to last forever. It's not going to wear out. This is a really high performance bearing. So you get this as part of the rebuild kit. And then you'll get your new billet gate selector bushing, or slave bushing. And then you'll get a ball bearing conversion kit for the OEM gate selector. And what that looks like is your OEM gate selector is essentially, where'd that lever go? Okay, so your OEM gate selector bushing is this metal sleeve, and these little, looks like Delrin plastic sleeves, and they just press right into here. And they work fine, you know, they do, but you can get a little wiggle left and right. There's not, the friction's not great. It's not the best. It works fine for exactly, you know, for a commuter car, it works great. But what I've done now is, this is actually why the kit's expensive. This conversion kit, these are really high quality bearings, and there's a lot of little parts that I put together here. So you've got these two ball bearings and this billet spacer that goes in the middle. And the spacer is so that when you clamp all this down, it doesn't put a lateral force or an axial force on the bearing races, because these are radial bearings only. They don't really have a whole lot of thrust. And on the side here are these little conical spring washers. So we'll go through how to install that, but this essentially replaces just this in these sleeves. And so it feels so much nicer. In any small movement of the shifter here, just the tiniest movement of the shifter creates movement on the gate selector. So it's zero compliance setup. It's very tight. It feels amazing. It's like you're driving a Porsche. And also, if you have an M5, you'll get a new nut and washer. And then if you don't get the full race kit and the rebuild kit, you'll get an extra cotter pin for the OEM gate selector. And then included in this little pack is the sandpaper that you need to fit the inserts. And again, you can reference the other video I made dedicated to that. It's just a short little flick. I don't know why this bag's here. Oh. Okay, so that's the base rebuild kit. The other option you can get is, here's the base rebuild, the short shifter kit with the drop bushings, or you can get the combination of the rebuild and the short shifter. And so you'll get this whole pack, which is the bucket drop kit, the premium rebuild kit, and some bushings, and the lever. The last kit is the full race kit, which is everything that comes in here. So you get the premium rebuild kit and the bucket drop kit. You'll get the appropriate gate selector. You can get either your polyurethane very stiff bushings, or you can get your carbon fiber solid bushings. And then you'll get a gate selector, and if you do get this kit, because this is already provided, I will for sure have this bushing fitted. So you won't have to do anything to this. And then lastly, it's not a kit, but I have about 20 of these shifters that I need to strip down in media blast so they're completely clean, and I'll be getting them all zinc plated. And then I'll be fully rebuilding these shifters so that they're ready to go and drop in as soon as you get them. Because I know that this is finicky and some people aren't as good with some of this stuff. And so those will be significantly more expensive because there's a lot of labor that goes into, you know, cleaning all the gunk off, soaking them in a de-rusting solution, and then media blasting them so that all the scratches and most of the imperfections disappear, and then taking them, getting them zinc plated, and then the labor of assembling everything. I suspect the price is going to be around $500. I still have to figure out how much time it actually takes me in a production setup where everything's set up and I'm just kind of plugging and chugging through. But I suspect those are going to be about $500. These full race kits I think are $320. The cheapest, the short throw kit I think is $110. The premium rebuild kit is $165. The combination I want to say is $230 to $240 I think, and then the full race kit, which I said already, is about $320. So that kind of explains what all the kits are. If you like the way your shifter looks and feels as far as motion and position, and you just want it to feel like a Porsche, get this. You'll also need my cables to make it feel like a Porsche, unfortunately. I've bought a lot of cables on Facebook. So not cables that were posted on eBay with people having the expectation to make money, but cables people are just trying to make money off because they have them. And unfortunately, most of the cables I got, I would consider not resellable. But what that's pointed out to me is that people are just running horrible setups that they're blaming on the shifter, and it's actually the cables. The latest example, we've got a good one here. So I am not going to fault the person I bought these from, because I'm going to suspect that they probably didn't even know. Man, these are just in horrible shape in every aspect you can see. But I found one thing interesting. Yeah, like the sleeves are just out. Like it's a rough time. I'm not sure why. I got to take the shifter apart and look. But these aren't even the right cables for the shifter I thought I was buying. He put a rubber sleeve inside here to take up some of the slop. So, like, it worked. Plastic would have worked better, but, like, I've seen cables come in where this isn't even in there, so it's just flopping around. So, I got to get my cables up and listed. I was hoping to do it this week. One priority takes precedence over the other, and I'm just trying to get these shifters done and out the door and make sure everybody's happy. Alright, I should probably go through the actual rebuild process and all the things that are very important. Okay, so now for the fun part. How to actually properly assemble everything. I'll try to go through the most that I can. But what I currently have is a 5 or 6 mil wrench will work, an 8 millimeter a 7/16. I apologize for that. A 10 mil, a 12 mil. I also have a 7/16 here. And then you'll need a 4mm and a 5mm Allen key. And then a 10 and 12mm socket. And I think that's it. So we'll start out by disassembling. I don't currently have a car with either a manual transmission or a running car with a full interior to show you the removal and installation of the shifter. But you should be able to figure that out. There's some bolts on the center console that you pull up. You can access this. You'll remove the cables. But this is basically how to assemble the shifter kit. There's a lot of videos people have already posted on how to remove and install shifters, so we'll just cover that. So the first thing you want to do is remove the shifter box from the base plate, and that uses a 12mm on both sides. And we will not be reusing these short OEM bolts if we're putting the short throw kit in. You will reuse the nuts though, so hold on to those. So now we've got the whole box loose from the base plate. Again, we don't need these screws, but we will want to reuse the nuts. We can set the base plate aside for the moment. It is typically easier to remove the main lever before removing the gate selector. For reference, this is kind of, the shifter's not actually too bad for side to side, or rotation. This one's in pretty good shape. If you hold this guy straight up and down, so that's got a fair amount of wiggle, left to right. Let's see, hold that in place, and then you can, yeah, so that's a fair amount of wiggle. So we'll get rid of that, and we will get rid of this. So you'll need a 10 mil. Power tools are just easy for this. It is what it is, but it's nice to just do that. You'll be reusing this hardware. If you guys need any hardware, I need. It's a lot of work to make parts, test parts, like all that stuff. So I'm trying to do the best I can, but I will be putting up listings for all the spare parts that I have, like the OEM parts. Yeah, this thing feels pretty worn out on the inside, though it doesn't look very worn out on the outside. So as you go, try to clean everything up to reduce the amount of grease that gets spread on everything. This is nasty. Very nasty. Oh. Alright, so now we'll take the gate selector out. Same thing, two 10 millimeters. You will not be keeping this hardware. I would have liked to, but I couldn't find a bearing that packaged that fit. And so when you take this out, if it hasn't been disassembled a million times, you'll get this little spring washer. And then you should have this bushing, which is just a sleeve with Delrin. So not only is the bushing sleeve, I mean, it's just loose. So not only is it loose just in rocking, it's got, you know, some up and down, and they put this in here to try to keep it oriented one way or the other, but what that does is it introduces play. So this is the point where the install is going to be a little different depending on if you're doing a full, like, just rebuild on a stock shifter, or if you are putting in a full race shifter. It's basically the same. Parts are a little different. So clean this up. We will not be reusing this. We will not be reusing these. Or this little springy guy. Oh, buddy, this is a dirty, dirty shifter. But it's the only one I have that I haven't currently modified or already prepped for rebuilds. So I'll put it together for the video and then take it right back apart again. So get this clean the best you can. Now here's the fun part. This is really hard to fit in. It is a very tight fit, for good reason. So you can use a screwdriver to pop these Delrin sleeves out, which we will not be reusing. Okay, so to make installation easier, if you buy the full race kit with the billet gate selector, I made this thinner so that it's slightly easier to install. So if you're using the billet gate selector, you can probably skip this step. If you're using the OEM gate selector and putting the new kit in it, you're not going to want to skip this step. And what this step is, it's to aid the installation of this because it's got some finicky little washers in there. Honestly, it does make installing either of them easier, but it is essential if you have this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the bolt that you used in the gate selector, and we are going to take the nuts from the gate selector and the main lever. If you have an M6 nut, it's kind of nicer to use because these are the OEM nuts are lock nuts, but likely this is all that you have. So what you're going to do is you're going to feed the screw in here a little bit, and you're going to thread in the nut the correct direction, with the flat facing towards the bolt head, and you're going to screw that in. And because you have lock nuts, annoyingly, you need to use a tool, and so we're just going to screw that in a little bit. And what we're doing is we're building a spreader with this guy. So you want the nut far enough down. Whoop! Not that far down. Boy, howdy, this is a pain in the ass. So you want to get the nut far enough down that you can fit another nut in there. And this is why it's better to not use these lock nuts, because they're pretty big and this is really tight. Alright. Okay. Yeah, I hate this. This is the least fun part of this installation, honestly. I'm sorry it's a pain in the ass, but it was the best way to get some solid, guaranteed performance out of the shifter. Okay. Ah. Yeah, these lock nuts are nice until you need to turn them by hand, and then they're just not so nice. Alright. Let's get the threads started. Which, threading not lock nuts backwards is also a huge pain in the butt. There we go. And we're going to want to make sure that this all fits. Hello again. What's up? This is a huge pain in the ass. You just moseying around? Yeah. Okay. I'm showing the customers how easy it is to do this by taking forever and getting angry at it. Yeah. It's really frustrating. These lock nuts are a huge pain in the ass to work with. But it's what they have. Honestly, it may just be worth throwing in some cheap M6 nuts, now that I think about it. Just so they don't have to deal with this at all. There we go. Okay, so essentially what you're doing is you're creating an inverted clamp. So once both the nuts are on, you'll use this to spread the gap a little bit. There we go. Okay. So you'll just want to turn them opposite directions, and unfortunately I do need another wrench for that. So maybe 2 10 mils. Boy, this is going really well so far, right? So you'll want to turn these opposite directions, and it creates a spreading effect. And you'll just want to see it so it starts to indent outward. There we go. So if you look real close here, you can see it kind of bulge here and here. And so you're just kind of creating like an inverted clamp or a spreader with the factory hardware. So once you've spread it out a little bit, you're good to pull it out. And even though that was a huge pain in the butt, it will make the rest of this much easier. Well, I didn't need that one anyways. Alright. So now that you're prepared for that, the way to properly install this, it's the installation of the kit is the same on this or this, but I'll show you on this because I know I'll sell this. And I probably won't sell this. It is really cold in here, so this probably will not go as well as it could. But the easiest way to install these is throw these in the oven at about 400F for, I don't know, 10-15 minutes to heat it up. And it makes the installation way easier. But for those who don't want to use the oven, or for some reason just can't, for whatever, we'll go through how to do it here. So you've got your bearing kit, and these are pretty tightly fitted on this nut. So what you might have to do is use your 5 or 6 millimeter box end wrench right here, because you don't want to pull on the outer races of these bearings or you'll break them. Well, you could break them. I don't know that you will, but just put your wrench up here so that you're pushing on the center of the race, and it'll just push right out without affecting the bearing at all. And so what you end up with in this little kit here is you've got 2 precision flanged ball bearings. You've got 2 stainless steel black oxide bevel washers, so they're directional, they have a spring built in. A brass washer, a billet stainless steel spacer, and then you have your retention nut at the end. And so it's good to install them in order. So this one kind of slipped in a little bit. Ooh, this one might actually go... Nope, not all the way in. I'm going to use a vise. If you don't have a vise, if you have any clamp, anything like that, anything you can clamp with is going to work. Technically, a hammer will work, but you want to make sure you only touch the outer edge of the flange. So the part that contacts the housing is the part you want to put the pressure on, not the inner part. So you can use that if you would like. Alternatively, if we set this up just right, you can use the hardware to pull it together if everything is straightened up. If it's not straightened up, it's not going to go great. So, hey, this one does kind of fit a little bit. So we'll see if that works. So just throw your nuts on. So if you're lucky and the fitment gets you started, you can do this. Otherwise, I find it best to use a vise to squeeze them together. And there they go, they're pulling each other in. Whoop. All right. I'd say that worked pretty well. And it should sit pretty flush. This actually has a small gap. I'm going to give it a squish in the vise and see how it goes. Okay, well, yeah. So it does pull the center together, which is something you ideally don't want to do. But these were pretty soft. So it is probably better that you just use some sockets. So I think we should probably just do that. I'll show you here what I'm going to do. And then, oh, these might actually work. Oh, heck yeah. Let's just use these. Perfect. These are a slightly different size than they used to be. So, yeah, these will work great. You can actually use these bearing spacers. So just set them up like this. And probably without the washers on here. There we go. So you just want to use the screw to keep the little spacer in the center there aligned. There we go. Hey, look at that. golden. So we'll go ahead and take this and we'll throw it in the vise real quick. Or smack it with a hammer, whatever you got. There we go. Now that little gap is gone. And we didn't have to put any force on the bearing race, and the center sleeve is now held in by the bearing races, and we've got perfectly smooth function. Now for the hard part. So you're going to take one of the spring washers and you're going to set it on one side of it. I think man, this is not the greatest install video. It's more like a podcast. I should do these live, honestly. Just talk to people while I'm doing this. So now would be a good time to fit your bushings into this, since it's out. They should be pretty close. There is another video that I'll link that is very specific on how to fit these. But you just want to make sure that it kind of barely slides in there. This one gets caught up a little bit on the back side. And so you're just going to take your 600 grit sandpaper and a hard flat surface, which I have right here. And you're going to sand the sides that don't have the slit. So that's the top and bottom. And there we go. It fits perfect in there. There's zero slop left and right, up and down, whatever. So this guy's good to go. That's literally how quick it is. This Delrin AF, it sands very nicely. So we're gonna go ahead and set this guy aside right now. And maybe I'll put my spare parts not near all the new parts. That seems like a good idea. Okay, so now we're going to take the bucket and our finicky little pieces. The brash washer goes on the outside. You want these are conical spring washers, so you want the sides sticking out to press up against this, because these spring washers are going to center this in here. So there's a bunch of ways you can do this. I found the best way is to set the spring washer in. I wish you could see this from here, so I'll try to rotate here. Set the spring washer in, lift it across the top, and then set it down. And that should keep things lined up. It's really easy to do if you have a small screwdriver or a pick. In fact, I recommend a pick. So don't push the bolt all the way through. We got to get this one in. Which is generally a huge pain. I've done it where I've slid the top and bottom one in together. That sometimes works if you spread it out far enough, but you should be able to kind of drop it in and then kind of push it into place. Smaller screwdrivers work a little bit better because you can really just get in there. you're just going to push that guy down into the gap, which shows up right there, and take a small screwdriver, whatever you have. Honestly, radiator hose picks I found are the easiest to use. Yeah, so one of these guys, they're pretty nice actually. So you can just kind of put it in the hole there, and there we go. Pops right into place. Shove your bolt through. Aha. So if you don't spread that open, oh, I should also probably follow instructions here. I installed this backwards, so we're going to cut that out and redo it. Perfect. Hopefully everything stays in place here, so I can just pull this out. And put it back in the other way. The reason it needs to be on the outboard side inboard is for clearance to the chassis. So it looks like nothing moved. Alright, we're golden. So yeah, the bolt needs to be on the outside, or the bolt head, and then this has to stick inboard. And then this is a serrated flange nut, so it'll hold nice and tight. And then just tighten it up with your 8mm and your M4 right here. And because that it has that stainless steel spacer in between the bearings, you can just torque this guy down. It is, you know, as hard as makes sense. I probably should go through and put torque specs for people who like torque wrenches, so I can calculate all that out. But I just, you know, kind of fix it nice and tightly. And look at that, 0 friction, but it is insanely stable, left to right. Okay, so the hard part's done. Now for the easy part. This guy, which is also finicky. You're going to take your 2 10mm and pop this guy apart. Note that the bolt heads go to the back. And these guys are going to be nasty. We will be reusing the hardware here and these metal plates. So you can just pull everything apart. So yeah, this one looks almost brand new, like someone has rebuilt it recently. So that slop that you saw is kind of the best you'll get with OEM parts. Yeah, these are not worn out at all. They have scratch marks, but no wear marks, or no like wear gouging. So you can kind of see, yeah. So these are the 2 bad sides, so you can kind of see, hopefully in the camera, these edges are not gouged, they're just kind of scratched, and same with these. So this is the best you'll get with an OEM setup, which is still not very good. So we'll pull all those nasty guys out. Oh. You can give this a smack on the ground if you need it to come out. That's only if you're replacing this centerpiece too. If you're not replacing this bearing, don't bother removing this, which Yeah, whoever rebuilt this, there's O-rings that are supposed to go in here that are not in here. So yeah, this has definitely been rebuilt recently. And they didn't use any grease putting it back together. That's kind of funny. Alright, so we'll clean that out. Usually these guys are so worn you can just pop them off. But if you can't, put them in a vise, grab them along the little parting lines there, and what you can do is you can just pry it out of the vise. Otherwise, they do just kind of pry off. There we go. I just put the screwdriver in and popped it off. This is 7/16 in case you're curious. Okay, so now this is all cleaned up and ready to be rebuilt with the full kit. So we will go through all that now. I'm going to use the other shift lever with the M5. So I'll go through the differences between those once we get to those points, which I would have already done in the introduction, but trying to stay linear here. Okay, so I've got my newly cleaned shift lever. Do not use any grease at this point because we need to make sure everything fits correctly. So, you can put it in piece by piece, or you can try to stuff the whole pack in. Doesn't really matter. This should just slide right in. If it doesn't slide in, take some of the 600 grit sandpaper. And there's probably just some burrs in there, but I have yet to have one not fit, even when they're a little rusty. And next are these nylon spacers. These are part of the bearing conversion kit, so you won't get these if you get the full rebuild kit. And again, those just pop in there too. Okay. So, now's the fun part. Take your anti-rotation slider and your ball retainer sleeve, which is my name for them. Honda's name was a little too generic. So I've got these set so that they barely sit in here. So it's a nice little fit. However, because of manufacturing variation, like I mentioned before, they may not fit perfectly. So you're going to want to pop these into place. And then you're going to want to check how they fit. And so this one is a little tight. It's a little tight in the front, but it goes in fine in the back. And so what that tells me is that these aren't bent straight. And so you can either try to straighten them out, which personally, I think I might do that. Just so it wears better over time. Yeah, because that's pretty tight at the top and not so tight in the bottom. So what I'm going to do is, yeah, I can even see how this one's bent inward just a little bit. So if you can see this guy right here, this one is bent this way just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is put this in my vise and straighten it just a little bit. It's really hard to do because usually what you'll end up doing is bending the whole flange, which then bends back again as soon as you bolt it down. Yeah, both of these are like that. I can see the gap in there. All right, so we'll check this one. It fits a lot better, but to get it to fit perfect, what we're going to want to do is take our 600 grit sandpaper, and again our flat surface, and we're just going to sand it down just a tiny bit. may think this is a pain in the ass, but other than completely changing the shifter design, there's no other way to make a zero compliant shifter. Alright, so we do fit in. It's still a tiny bit tight on this one. That's also why you kind of have to go through this, because they're all very different in the stampings by about 0.1 to 0.2 mils is kind of the general difference I see across the board. You know, I think I probably have about 30 of these shifters between the different accords and preludes. There we go, getting a little closer. There we go, that's better. I will grab a new piece of sandpaper though. This guy is pretty worn out. So this is actually the strip you'll get. Is a strip cut just like this. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, you want to be a lot more gentle with fresh sandpaper. Oh yeah, see, it just fits in there. And what you want is you want it to start catching friction, because all these are bent in a little bit, and that's kind of provides a spring force to take up some slop. But you want it to start kind of sticking about halfway up this second part here, because this only goes back about this far total. And so as long as it's nice and loose right up until about that point, not loose but free, you're good to go. Okay, so this one's nice and fitted. Yep. Alright, this one needs a little bit of work still. So alternatively, if you don't want to sand these down a bunch, you can try to bend those flanges so that they're perfectly parallel, but you may end up finding that you're actually bending the whole thing and not just that little flange. It can be done. It's what I do with my personal setup, but it's a lot more work than I think people who bought this signed up for. So I'll let you decide if you want to do it or not. Alright, this one's good to go too. So make sure you clean all the dust off. And you're going to want to assemble it completely before you add any grease, to make sure that the tolerance stack up isn't too high. And the reason for that is you'll find that, yeah, this stuff all fits together and feels great and nice, but once you bolt it together, the alignment of these metal plates can move around, and it will cause them to bind a little bit more. And so you just want to be very careful. And if you bolt them together fully assembled, you have a higher chance of it staying under alignment. So give that a go. Alright. Again, bolt heads towards the back. And we'll probably find if I use the impact gun, it will kind of mess this up a little bit, but we'll see what happens. Actually, I'll use this one. Go to tighten it. So check, we've still got good motion after tightening the one. There we go. We still got good motion after tightening the second one. So that means we are good to go. So now take it apart and grease it. Actually, you really don't need to unless you want to make sure it gets in everywhere. So the reason the grease is this yellowish thick color, which is probably a grease you likely haven't used before, is because it is a PTFE embedded grease. It is specifically a PTFE grease. And while I don't know every grease out there and I don't know the chemical composition of everything, it is the only grease that I would ever recommend that you use in a situation that may end up contacting a spherical bearing. And the reason that matters is because these spherical bearings have PTFE liners, and some of the greases can mess up the fiber liner that's inside here. And so that's why I got this grease. Go. Even these are a really tight fit too, so everything really just tightens up. So we'll put the ball back in because that really doesn't need grease at all, so don't worry about that. If you have an OEM bearing still, ball bearing in there, definitely feel free to grease it up because that will benefit from it for sure. Alright, so if you get the baggie, I would recommend you just cut the corner off and you can use it to squeeze. I'm not going to waste the baggie. I have my own tub of grease. And so I'll grab a Q-tip for an applicator, or a zip tie works really well if you're not just going to cut the grease. And so you want to make sure that the inside of the anti-rotation sliders are nice and greased up. Nothing needs to be excessive, so be cautious of that. It's just going to get everywhere, like it's not going to hurt anything. But twisting the Q-tip definitely helps to prevent huge messes. And then we'll go ahead and grease the surfaces of the retainer sleeves. Stuff can get nasty. Make sure you don't tighten these without it fully assembled because it will change the alignment and mess things up. So, and then also grease the outsides of these to your heart's content. The nice thing about the grease is the molecules not only take up space, so it will technically get tighter with a little grease, but it also reduces the friction a little bit. This is already some really slippery plastic, but it also adds damping, so it adds a more refined feel as you move. So a little bit of friction actually isn't a bad thing. Okay, cross your fingers that it doesn't bind up at all and that it still goes together very nicely. Okay, first one's tight. have gotten out of alignment a little bit with that one. So let's loosen it up. Did not get lucky. So bring this one in, tighten this one first. There we go. All right. That one worked better, so now we'll just go over and we'll tighten the other one. Oops, that was this one. Okay, tight and tight. Okay, we still good? Hey, we're still good. Hell yeah. Alright. All the hard parts are over at this point. Thank goodness. Lastly, we'll throw a little bit of grease in this guy. Probably on the ball is easier than in it. So just go ahead and get that guy nice and lubed up. And I use the vise generally to install this. Just give it a squish, but you can also just... I would recommend not pushing it in, because it can cause the plastic to fracture from the impact. So I would definitely recommend using some kind of clamp, because just that impact can... I've had some of the OEM ones break doing this, but you can feel that this is really tight. No issues there. And then we need to install it. And we'll throw a little grease on the slave bushing, the top and bottom. Oops, sorry. A little bit on the top, a little bit on the bottom. Same with this guy. We're done with the nasty grease. Okay, go ahead and tilt the ball upward, like that. And you're going to want to scoop this ball in before anything else. So just kind of get it in there. Slide her in. And you're going to want these bolts... The alignment of this, if it's tilted at all, it's going to bind up and get stuck. So you want to make sure it goes in parallel to how it's going to be installed. I don't recall if it matters which way the long bolt gets reinstalled. I don't think it's been an issue I've encountered yet. So just install the original long bolt, the original lock nut, the two 10 millimeters. Right here. Feel free to just tighten that bad boy up. Okay, we have a functional shifter. And again, let's look at the slop we have. If we hold the lever completely straight, we've got no left to right slop whatsoever. As soon as the lever moves, it moves. So that's super tight. And then the knob, it doesn't twist at all. That thing is completely solid. Alright, so now we need to install the drop kit. Actually, that's not true. So it may be easier, it's probably easier to install the short throw lever while this is on. My apologies. But you don't need to. So again, I'm using the M5 version, which has this slightly larger hole, because they have a slightly larger post, versus the original lever that came off this shifter has the one with the spacer so that it sits, you know, up against this perfectly without that screw in the way. So let me, oops. Yeah, I just got to remove that screw, but you get the idea. We do, however, need to install this one on this shifter. So I'm not sure why, but every single person who has installed one of these and communicated to me that they did it incorrectly and didn't realize it. So the short throw lever, whatever kit it comes with, it will come with 220 sandpaper. What you're going to want to do is just give that guy a polish, because this leading edge here gets a little gunked up, or just messed up, whatever machining differences at Honda, I don't know. But you just want to slide this guy on. There we go. We got a nice fit right there at the end. The U-bolt encompasses the shift lever. I'm not sure why people installed it with the U-bolt the other way and then just had the washer like butt up against this. I even had the U-bolt in, like, I shipped them with the U-bolt oriented in the correct direction, and they still just take it off, turn it around, and install it anyways. But you've got some brass washers to keep the pretty 7075 aluminum in place. And then this is the unfortunate 7/16. So I considered making a custom U-bolt to keep it all metric, but like there's enough labor with this whole thing anyways. Like I'm not gonna add a bunch more just to save a socket size, a bunch of cost and labor. So just tighten this thing down. It's got nylock nuts, so it shouldn't ever slip off. Just go ahead and just tighten her down as tight as seems reasonable. This 7075 aluminum is as strong as alloy steel, so if you break it, honestly, I'd like to hear about that, because that would be pretty wild. Oh, actually, before you torque these down, my bad, you want to install the retention feature on the top, because it will pull them out just a little bit. There we go. So this one uses a brass washer and a serrated M5 nut. And so if you have the M5 version, you're going to want to tighten that down. And just give that a good snugging. And then go back to these guys and tighten these down. There we go. Okay. Now this guy's installed. What are we forgetting? Alright, now we need the drop kit. And people have also, I've had 2 or 3 guys install this incorrectly too. So these actually go the opposite direction. They go in through the bottom. So you're going to want to put your spacers on, put your bolt through the bottom, slide your bucket over, and then reuse your original nut. Don't tighten it down too much so that you can slide these other guys in here. And you come in with an M12 and a 5mm hex, Allen, whatever, and just snug her down. if you take this setup and install it on your car as is, it's not going to fit. The bolt back here will hit the body. So you could take a hammer and smack it out of the way, and that's fine. But you'll get bushings also. These are the real rear eccentric bushings. These are just some PLA guys that I use for testing. It's cheap. And so the ones that look symmetric will be your fronts. They're taller to clear, but the ones that aren't symmetric, the eccentric bushings, they need to be installed in a certain orientation. So as I mentioned before, we're lifting this up a little bit, and so technically the center, the path that these bolts take, you know, they're shaped kind of like this, right? So as you move up, that distance gets further and further away. And so if you don't want to use these bushings, you'll probably have to get rid of the sleeves of your OEM bushings or your aftermarket bushings, whatever. But if you're using mine, these have a notch. See, there's a notch there, and there's a notch there. And you want the notch to face inboard of the shifter. And so you want those just to both line up. Let them face inboard. Same thing with the other side. And what you end up with is a properly centered hole now. So that extends the hole further out, and it also on the top makes everything look centered, so it looks nice. But as you can see, they're definitely offset. So a couple other things while we're here. I may be updating the washer that comes with this. I wanted to find a flange nut that fit and was also a nylock nut, and I really struggled to. So if you have the OEM shifter bushing here, without this washer, you can bottom out the nut and tighten it metal on metal, and it clears, but this washer is a little too thick, and so it will actually squish the bushing a little bit. I made this gap the same size as the OEM one, but they have like a really, really, really thin washer, and so that's where that comes in. So I may put a metal washer on the outside here or something, but because it's a really high quality nylock nut, what you're going to want to do is once your bushing is installed, just tighten this down until there's no slop. It doesn't need to clamp, it just needs to hold its position. And another thing I noticed, unfortunately, because of the variation in this welded and bent hollow rod, some of the shift cables I have found will touch this on install, and it's actually a pain in the ass. So I apologize for that. The best way to combat that is when you install this lever, try to rotate it forward. Like rotate this forward and then clamp everything down. But so far I haven't had one that you couldn't install the big fat shift bushing on. It just, you gotta kind of squish the bushing and then put it on. So the next revision will give a little bit more space. I was just trying to keep the knob position identical by keeping like the swept radius from here to here the same. And so I just need to bring it forward a little bit more. And then this guy's good to run. Here, this may seem a little counterintuitive. The way I have this set up is you pull the screw out, assemble the cable onto here, and then you put the screw in, and then you tighten this nut down. There's two reasons I do that. One is having the retention nut on this side makes a slightly stronger connection, because some of the cables don't have the plastic rod in here, and so you won't be able to fully clamp that cable down, or it will bind, similar to the OEM bushing over here. So what you do is you just screw this guy in, until it fits nice. If you do have a plastic bushing, go ahead and, you know, clamp it. And then you tighten this guy down. And so that does leave a stronger connection for kind of a cantilever fixture. If you're using my race cables that have the metal bushing there, it really doesn't matter. But this is a lot lower clearance, and so this is guaranteed to clear the center console with no issue. Where if you have it the other way around, this nut and end sticks out kind of far, and it will actually hit the console. So now I think we need to just install it and show you what to look out for some clearance stuff that hopefully you don't have to deal with, but something I'd like you to at least check for. Okay, so it's bolted into the car. I didn't even think about it, but just to clarify, these eccentric bushings need the lines facing inward. You can kind of see that one right there a little bit. So just make sure those are facing inward and everything will perfectly line up. And there's a few things to check. So something that doesn't matter, but so notice how much clearance we get between this and this. It is there is clearance, but that was the minimum height the spacers could be to prevent interference. And honestly, interference doesn't really matter functionally, since this is all solid anyways, like this connection. But I didn't want it rubbing, I didn't want it bending, and I didn't want the zinc plated versions to also rub and bend. So that was one thing. But the reason we did all this is you want to make sure that that bolt right there has got clearance, which it does. If it doesn't have clearance, there's a couple things you can do. The easiest would be to just put a spacer in here, a small one, you know, maybe a washer. One washer would probably do it. Or if you're handy, you can shorten up these guys a little bit, and you'll probably cause interference on this. But so far with these proper spacers and these bushings, I haven't seen a setup where that bolt didn't clear. So once you're sure that the bolt clears, then we go ahead and install the cables. I don't have a holder in here, but it's all pretty straightforward, right? So throw these guys in. And like I said, you're going to want to unscrew this. Okay, my apologies, this is going to be a little sketchy because I'm working with one hand here. But for the OEM line, cables, just go ahead and finger tight is good enough here. And then you're going to take your washer, throw that on, and your lock nut, throw that on. And then you're just going to torque the lock nut down while keeping this in place so that it doesn't spin. But that will essentially provide the clearance to the center console, like a lot better than having it mounted the other way. Alright, so here's my comment on the cables being a little finicky. So it hits just a little bit, but once it's on, once it's on, it completely clears, and so you're good there. But I definitely need to increase that on the next batch. Then throw your Delrin washer on and your nylock nut on. Yours will spin a lot more. This one is lacking a lot of threads, so it's missing most of the, it's missing most of the threads right there. So yours will start threading here, and but yeah, basically just snug it up and the nylock should stay in place. If any of these if there's any issues, I would, I need to know about everything. So please complain as much as you can, because the whole point of me trying to make these OEM fitment products is that they just work and they fit. So if you have any issues, I love hearing how awesome things are, but like criticism and feedback is a lot more productive to the business. So everything's in. It works. I have a 4-speed, so I don't have a 5th gear in this. And then my reverse are dog gears, so I can't line those up, unfortunately. But everything clears, barely, but it does. And then if we throw a center console on, one-handed of course, because that's how we roll. Man, I really should have put up a some kind of mount in here for the phone, because this is a waste of everybody's time. Alright, so even without carpet, or this being held up properly, because it goes up here, this is kind of how we clear. So if we show the cables, there we go, the cable's clear. At full forward, this clears. I can't really show you 5th gear, but it does clear when you go all the way over. So 5th gear's good. This is why I didn't want to sell the short throw kits without the drop kit, because this will hit. But otherwise everything clears. And it feels pretty good.